All right. Good evening, everyone. It's 5 o'clock here. I'm sure it's getting later everywhere, East Coast wise. Um, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Bryan Ollis. I'm coming out of Arizona. Um, Wanted to talk to you guys about just a couple subjects and couple topics, and then have some Q&A on the end of our discussion here towards really uh, fitness or exercise or just a couple of things surrounding this subject here. For those who are comfortable enough to share or want to talk about things. Um, with that, I ask that you keep your system on mute unless you want to ask a question directly. I know some people have a lot of background noise and things like that. And since this system works on Vox, it'll override and you won't be able to hear me if somebody's got a permanent noise in the background. So I appreciate that if everybody keeps it on mute unless you need to talk. But by all means, chime in if you've got something to say. We want to talk, want to share. Because I'm going to ask questions too, so we'll be interactive on the other end too. So I will be reaching out for that. Um, but a little bit about who I am. Currently, I work in the construction nuclear industry, but I have a background in nutrition and fitness. Um, I never went to licensed training as far as being a nutritionist, things like that. So I have to preface a lot of this stuff with what I'm about to share is that I am not a legal physician. And so if you have certain conditions or things like that, I can't give you or supersede what a doctor would need to share with you, as we all have different chemistry and makeups and different conditions that we deal with. Like, yeah, on one end could be diabetes, on the other end could be something more complicated. Not that that's not complicated. So um, at surface value, some of the stuff we'll share and we'll all talk about doesn't always apply to everybody else. And a lot of people don't always want to share their personal conditions, so that's fine. But at the end, we'll do a Q&A and we'll talk about a couple things and we will turn off recording during that for your own privacy. So for those who do worry about that stuff, it doesn't get saved and remembered for later. Uh, but about my background with that nutrition and fitness, back in 2001, 2002, I was afforded the opportunity through the military to take a nutrition and fitness course. I became the battalion liaison for um, exercise planning, programming, diet planning, and programming for those who were in a position that if they didn't lose weight in inches because of the demands from the military and how they do their weight standards in uniform, you can be removed from the military. So they would have to see people like me. I was one of the well-known ones on base. In my time of doing that, I had about 100 between male and female, where we set up dietary and exercise plans and got them within their height and weight standards. And again, if they didn't do it within 6 months, they would have to be reevaluated and looked at. And sometimes people go through conditions, thyroid conditions or other medical conditions that can affect their weight, their metabolism, just their general makeup. And so that's important for them to reevaluate after that 6 months, as if there is a real problem, versus them not taking care of themselves or eating right, because there is a necessity for a certain level of exercise while in the military, as I'm sure some of you either know or maybe you've served or have family who served. So it is a pretty big deal. I was that guy. I had people come to me and we go through and do a weight test. We do the body fat count. We would do a dunk tank versus a lot of these gimmicks of figuring out what it is based on numbers. We would stick you in a pool, put you in a chair, and put you in the water, and we would measure that. That's the best way to do an actual body fat count. The other thing is when it came to the nutrition and exercise plan, we would do a regimen of here's what we need to do to get us where we want to be, in order to execute this within 6 months, because it's hard. It's hard to lose weight. It's hard to lose inches and stay dedicated to it. But especially if your career is on the line, and consider that. For us, some of it's just kind of casual, maybe hobby, or maybe just I want to get into the gym. But for those individuals I worked with, again, over 100, um, that was their career, and they could have been fired after 18 years instead of being allowed to retire at 20. They could have been kicked out. So, to include some, early termers, that kind of thing. But that's where I stand. So there's some formulas and some measurements and some ways that they do things that are pretty effective. That it doesn't overlap into a lot of these diets and a lot of the fads that are going on, or a lot of the weight loss pills or supplements and stuff like that. The general makeup of it really goes into calories, understanding what they are for versus what we eat, understanding the education of our diet and our bodies, and individually we might all have varying diet or anatomy differences when it comes to our chemical makeup and our metabolism. So it's important to get educated. It's important to get the grand scope of things and what it is you want to honestly accomplish with that. For those who know me, they've heard me say this real specific question for anybody who wants to lose weight or make a change. I asked this specifically: do you want to weigh less or do you want to be smaller? Because the two are different and they are accomplished in different ways. And weighing less doesn't always mean smaller, and smaller doesn't always mean losing inches. All right, do you want to lose inches or do you want to weigh less? If that makes sense. So that's the big question, and really, it's about everybody's got a different journey or walk of life on why they want to get into fitness or exercise. So it's asking these questions of why do you want to do it? What's your interest? What's your goal? Um, you know, to what limit? And where is it going to take you? How's it going to affect you mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually? Us being of faith, for those who are on the call, um, there is a spiritual aspect to this, and it does affect us in one way or another on that level. So there's a wide variety of things that can go over that. Um, any questions so far, before I finish about myself?
Not for me.
All right. All right. So really, the one of the first topics I want to bring up is education. Um, Sometimes a quick Google search or YouTube, or getting into the magazines or whatever you might be a part of, or just asking others can go a long way. But there are some specific definitions I encourage other people, everybody, to really look into and understand what, why, and how. Um, the best thing you can do is get familiar with what it takes and what those terms are, and where they come from and what this all means. And one of the big questions I'll ask any one of my people I'm working with fitness is a simple question of, without looking in the dictionary or even using Google, I'll ask from anybody in this group who can answer what a calorie is and how it's measured. And by any means, anybody just jump in off the top of your head. Don't be shy. I'll say this: almost everybody's going to have the wrong answer, so don't be afraid to speak on it.
My Google's not fast enough.
No Googling.
I had said energy before, and that was not actually correct. So I forget what the right answer was.
Okay, so energy. What else? What do we see that term as when you hear the word calorie? Let me ask you that. What does it make you think of?
Donuts. Oh, wait a minute.
When I say calorie, it makes me think of things that I have to cut because there's too many calories in it. So you want to watch what you're eating and putting in too much of a bad thing.
That's a good one. It's a good definition. Good way to look at it. Seeing what it makes me think of. Anyone else?
The energy that it's required to burn, to burn, yeah, to burn energy. I'm not making sense. You know what I'm saying, Brian? Help me out there.
Yeah, the energy it takes, the amount of heat it takes to burn the fat cell or the stored fat that's in our bodies, is a good way to put it. There's a real specific definition, and again, none of this is to pick on anybody or call anybody out, but it's important to really understand what this is on what's calorie or what's food calorie, even how it's measured in food. And if you get a grasp on the basic of that, you can build on that. And a lot of this stuff, I encourage everybody to see this as building blocks on a lot of these terms. What is calorie? What do we do with it? How does it affect us? How's it stored? So by definition, a calorie is a unit of energy. But specifically, it's a calorie is the amount of energy or heat it takes to raise the temperature of 1 gram, specifically, of water 1 degree Celsius. So that's 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit. But 1 calorie is equal to roughly 4 joules. Dealing with, if people get into the scientific factor of it. Here we go. We got another one coming in the room here. So who's heard it put that way prior to this? So here. And I'm bringing this stuff up because the thing about diet and exercise is a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to burn calories, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. But terminology does matter. And whenever you're trying to really pinpoint and accomplish these kind of goals, it's so good to get into the education of a lot of different subjects, not just this. So things like that is why I want to point it out. This term and some other terms that you're going to be coming across as your exercise and in your walk of life with this, really starts to expand. Some of the other things go into the medical side. What is it? What is diabetes really? What is hypoglycemia? What is heart conditions and fatty liver and all that? It's really good to know what these do. It also means knowing the science behind a couple of terms I'll use. One is gut health. The other one is how there's these things in our body give off hormones to create cravings and things like that, and recognizing what it is that's doing that to make us want one thing or another. Those hormones are exponential when it comes to ladies whenever you're pregnant, as most often people get cravings and things like that. I've heard some people don't always, but it does happen. Those are certain hormones that are being pressed inside of you in your gut, that's triggering a specific desire from whatever's trying to build, and it has to do with the gut flora. There's actually good and bad bacteria inside of your gut, and there's a balance to keeping one of those happy, and you can keep the wrong one happy, and that causes a lot of problems when it comes to food addiction, food cravings, midnight cravings, things like that. Because when they're up crying, they're releasing a hormone that goes into your body that makes you go, oh, I got to feed this thing. You don't realize that that's what you're actually feeding. It's not you, it's the flora inside of you saying, I want sugar, or I want this or that. And unfortunately, when it's a sugar craving, it's the bad flora. That's a big indicator, because the stuff that's in there throws back all of the flags inside of you that says, man, I want something sweet or this or that. They're essentially starving and saying they want more. So sometimes it's not us. I recommend a book dealing with this and a whole range of subjects around this called Gut Health Protocol. I recommend it. It's an excellent one to understand a little bit about what's going on inside of us from a pretty easy to understand breakdown. For those who have read it, can we get any opinions of that book from anybody who's read it?
It was really good. And I had already started my journey with the gut health before that. And it backed up everything that I'd learned from a naturopath that I had consulted. It was really good.
Very nice. Yep. Prior to that, have you heard about that? I mean, like to that degree?
No, there was a lot of things that they definitely touched on that I did not hear about. Because mine was pretty much a high level stuff where I was on stomach medication, and it literally was not allowing me to absorb any nutrients or many nutrients. And I didn't realize that, you know, that medication was really actually making me unhealthy.
Yeah.
And so my high level knowledge before that was just, you need, gut health is very, very important to our bodies and our well-beings, from everything from, you know, just our immunity to just everything. And
Absolutely.
then the book really broke it down and explained it much more in depth. So it's a very good book.
Absolutely. I recommend that book because it brings in some points of education when it comes to our food intake and sometimes our chemistry dealing with the medicines we might be dealing with. Unfortunately, we, you know, for those of us who have to take certain medicines or maybe are on certain supplements that are needed, that's one thing. But it is important to know how those things can affect your digestive system and what's going on there. And the other thing is really taking the time to read on the digestive system and how we're breaking down things. Another big topic on quick to get into it is metabolism and understanding what that is as far as the definition and really how that breaks down. And that's a complicated chemistry of what our body is doing as a habitual system. But we have the ability to control our metabolism based on a few factors: what we eat, how much we eat, how frequent we eat, what's in the food we eat, um, where we can boost our metabolism and we can actually break our metabolism. And one of those big ways that comes with breaking our metabolism, where your metabolism has kind of a 2-week natural interval, and then in 6 weeks it actually starts to gain memory and stays kind of on the same track until you do a major shift. But unfortunately, the word major is kind of overlooked. A major shift can actually be something as simple as cheating on a diet, depending on what you eat. If you feel that it's a certain direction, like, oh yeah, it's a cheat day, then you can actually reset all of the work you've put in within 6 weeks by 5 weeks and 5 days worth. And you decided to have a cheat day before the 6 weeks even started. It can reset. It can absolutely have a hard time getting back to what it was. So you got to start over, and really it goes into some discouraging results on your own end of like, man, I'm doing all this. What happened? What did I do wrong? Well, you can reset your metabolism, and so it's really good to understand and get into metabolism and the psychology behind it, dealing with all of that. And another subject where we all deal with, and whether it's this or other aspects of our life, is discouragement. How many of you have got into a diet that everybody's doing and they're hearing that, oh man, this works, this works, this works, and you're doing it and it's not working for you? First thing that you feel is you're discouraged from a number of things. Who's ever experienced that?
I have tremendously.
Me too.
Got to. Same.
Absolutely. It affects us all, right? And you could be on cloud 9 and doing well, and the next day you can hit rock bottom with discouragement, and it can make you want to quit. It can make you say, you know what, I'm going to change my diet. I'm not going to do this anymore, because it does take dedication. It does take a certain amount of commitment and fidelity to what it is you're doing. It really is a life-changing decision whenever you really want to do something. Now, if it's a fad diet and you're like, oh, I'm going to try like a Daniel, the Daniel diet, Daniel fast for a certain amount of time, or, those kind of things that are designed to be seasonal, that's one thing. But if you're looking to make a change in your life with diet and exercise, you can't cut corners. You can't have cheat days. You can't do a lot of these things. Now, when we say cheating in general, that still varies, right? Not everything is going to be bad for you to cheat with, if we're going to use that term, because you can get to the point where your metabolism is in such a momentum that you can have what's considered junk food and still be fine. But there are some things in that junk food list that can absolutely reset you. So this is where the education comes in, where you look into what it is you're eating and how it affects your body. And these books really do explain where are the bad foods, things you want to stay away from. So education is absolutely a big part of everything we do when it comes to exercise, diet and exercise. The other aspect of diet and exercise is the diet, what we're eating, and what we're doing with all of this. You know, a lot of people don't like diets because they don't like the food or the taste or whatever, or they don't like the portions or limitations of it. And that's another one that can be discouraging when it comes to what we're intaking. Um, Something I teach and I push for, that's tried and true, is portions and the amount of portions. When it comes to being on a good diet, eating that right healthy foods, and people want to go on veggie diets or things like that. Use that for an example. It doesn't do you any favors if you still overeat, and overeating comes with certain hormones that are given off in the body. Um, Something I want to explain, and I want everybody to really catch on to this, is when you're eating and you feel full, what is your body telling you? Your body is actually telling you, it's not the simple title that we're full. It's actually telling you you've overeaten. And it's a hormone that pops off and says, stop, we can't go anymore. When your actual eating property probably would have been 1/3 or even greater before that you should have not had. The actual portion of food for people's natural eating habits is usually much smaller what we're supposed to be having. But living in a society as we are in, a very blessed, economy, and we're in a part of the world, assuming everybody here is in this position, that we have massive portions, plenty for leftovers. You can go get a 76-ounce steak at some of these restaurants and eat to your heart's content or till you feel full. And that's everywhere. Nobody wants to go to a restaurant where like, oh, they didn't give me enough. And I get that. That's, our very spoiled society that feels that way. But there are places that around the world that don't have that option. So we are blessed. That's why I use that term. But the hormone and understanding the hormones that are in our gut is very important. And so when we get that hormone that says we're full, we need to really stop looking at it as, oh, I'm full, I had enough, to I'm actually overeating and I've eaten too much and I need to not do that again. And that's a difficult thing to get to, because like as children and as many adults, they want to eat till they're full. Um, or as children will say, well, I'm still hungry. Are you really? I don't think people are getting that same hormone as I'm hungry now if they've just eaten, even though it was a small portion. And so that's something to really take on that. Does anybody have any questions or comments on this piece that I'm talking about here, dealing with food portions or the hormones?
How do you tell what is a proper portion?
It's a tough one. The general idea is if you take a loosely balled fist, your fist in particular, the outside of your hand, to your palm, to your knuckles, that is one portion of your meal. I say one portion. That is a meal altogether. Is what we're supposed to be limited to. Unfortunately, our stomach stretches, and we can cause it to be semi-full to expanded in a daily basis, and so it will retain that shape. What's actually going on in there is the gut flora increases, the hormones increase, and this leads to an excess of these hormones, which actually leads to things like diabetes. And so, and many other issues too. I deal with my own personal stuff with this, dealing with hypoglycemia, and into the depth of what a lot of that stuff goes into. We deal with hereditary, we deal with gene, and we deal with allergies, but sometimes we bring it on ourselves based on our diet. And so this is something to be conscious of, and especially when you've got your own children. Another thing about diet, getting into the physical discipline aspect, discipline comes from at a very young age, how we take our food and how we eat our food. I see a hand.
That's me, Bryan.
Oh, by all means.
Question.
Yeah.
Something you said caught my attention. You said that allergies can be brought on yourself. So, using food, is there a way to avoid that? Because I battle heavy with that.
Yeah. So that's a tough one. There is dealing with allergies, dealing with certain things that combat allergies, I can tell you that it's not a myth. There's a lot to it. There's science to it. Dealing with things like the most natural substances we have. I'll use one of the best known one is going to be honey. If you've ever worked with that or know about eating raw honey or localized honey,
Raw local honey. Yep.
right, and that will help with a lot of issue with certain allergies. But allergies are pretty wide expanding, so sometimes allergies can get pretty big and beyond some of our food. But on the low end, yes, food can be an assistant towards dealing with allergies, and so can targeting that specific flora in our gut, where we give into the good but not the bad. If you suppress the bad flora, a lot of that stuff goes away. A lot of it helps us dealing with our digestive system, our enzymes, our liver, our gallbladder. A lot of that stuff kind of goes like adjust back to where it's supposed to be, versus in the excess lifestyle that we're all so used to living into. And I don't think there's very many people in the whole country that don't live in that excess lifestyle. Again, this is our culture. So, but things like raw honey or a lot of raw ingredients dealing with vegetables, a lot of your darker greens, spinach. That being said, some people could be allergic to spinach or the darker greens. I know an entire category of people that can't eat certain vegetables because they have an allergy to it. So, along the lines of that, also seafood allergies and what's going on in there. So yeah, there are some foods that can help and assist that. That does take some search. There's not a one size fits all, but it is more on the natural end of things, outside of going into taking some real specific supplements or like a high count, uh, like a high flora count of assistance. If you ever add that to your diet, I don't know if anybody's ever done that, but that was a good question. Any other questions like that? Okay. All right. So we got Robert who joined us. Appreciate you joining us, Robert. And for all of everybody who joined a little bit later, thank you for joining. So there's a lot going on in this conversation here. And for those who joined a little bit later, please, I encourage you, jump in on the conversation. This is pretty open. If you've got questions or anything, or curiosities, or maybe something I can elaborate on, I'd love to help. This is what I enjoy doing. That goes for everybody else who joined.
Well, hey, brother, I just got in from a Bible study. We have ours on Thursday night. But I wanted to say, in the line of the feeling full, feeling hunger, a lot of people also, when they're feeling hungry, mistake hunger for actually being thirsty,
True.
for thirst.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, if you want to expound on that, because I know a lot of people will do that and they keep snacking or overeating when actually their body is asking for water, for hydration.
Right, exactly. And so what you see is pretty common with that. A lot of people don't pay attention to themselves enough to realize what's actually going on. And if you had a physician or a nutritionist really point it out, they can cause those things to actually trigger in you during tests. And they could point out, hey, this is the I'm hungry hormone, and it does feel different than the I'm thirsty hormone. But for most people, they just take it as, oh, I'm hungry, I must want something. And in our natural, just casual being, well, let me go feed what the body wants. And we don't always associate that internally as being optional. It's just hunger is hunger. But there is a difference where your body goes through hydration needs. Your body does tell you that it needs a certain amount of salt, it needs a certain amount of just H2O. It even needs a certain amount of fat within it. And you can get that from different things, to include a certain amount of sugar. People can get, cravings for certain things. So the question is the hormone, the good hormone or the bad hormone, coming from the right or wrong section, causing excessive eating or excessive snacking when you could just be needing to drink something? And due to the metabolic breakdown and due to the way we process food, it's always going to be better to drink something than it is to snack on things anyway. Now, the calorie, the unit we talked about in the beginning, the method of our body burning that stored fat and things like that isn't as eventful when we drink stuff, obviously, but it does make a difference what we're doing if we're going to be in a position where we should be drinking water. And that being said, water for all these diets needs to be a part of the diet. And a lot of people don't talk about that. That's a whole nother subject about how much water we really need, or how much water we go through, or how water affects us. And I do talk on this a little bit too, since we're between 65 and 75% water, depending on our person. So there is a level of water that we want within us, and the body has a beautiful way of processing out the excess water, outside of actually going in and just drinking, jug after jug after jug. Our natural intake of water is pretty good. I know a lot of major dietitians encourage a lot of water throughout the day, so many bottles of water, so many ounces of water. And I think that's excellent. Can't go wrong there. But just remember, especially when you're dealing with exercise, if you're putting water in your body, it takes a while to actually metabolize and get to the cells that needs to be there, or the organs that could be lacking water. And so water isn't an immediate solution. So keep this in mind. What you drank the day before assists you the day after when it comes to water. So if you plan on doing some heavy sweating exercises, maybe something simple as just gardening or whatever, and it's going to be a hot day, don't start that morning to drink. You need to be drinking the day prior, because people can get into a lot of heat stress situations and dehydration situations that can actually be detrimental to the body. You can actually go into some major issues if you're dehydrated, along with obviously heat stress. So it's important to understand those things. So that's another thing about this subject on the education, understanding what dehydration is, understanding what heat stress is, and what to look for, and all of that. All of this goes into the education half of diet and exercise. And it's not just enough to have diet alone or exercise alone. Unless you want to be spoon-fed and be told what to do, what to eat, what to drink, when to, do all these things. Not everybody has that luxury. And the foundation of all of this only helps you gain results one way or another by understanding the fundamentals of all of this. So I absolutely preach and teach understanding the education of what it is you're trying to do and how to get there from a education standpoint, from a book standpoint. Really, and testimonial too. You're going to come across people. I know this is a part of a group that you're all sharing, and you've got conversation going. Your testimonies, your experience, your understanding, or things you've gone through is an encouragement and an education of sorts to other people. So it's really good to share your progress or your successes, and sometimes your failures. It's important to know what went wrong. Unfortunately, a lot of people have similar things that go wrong. But really the encouraging side is reaching out and saying, hey, maybe I messed up this week. Here's what I did wrong. And that gives up opportunity for other people to be encouraging, especially when it comes to the natural discourager. What's one of the other biggest discouraging tools we have when it comes to weight loss? And this hits hard for a lot of people. And this is a whole subject I'm leaning on here.
The
Can anyone?
scale.
What's that?
The scale.
Scale. All right. Why is that? What about that scale? What does it matter? Why can that be discouraging?
I don't want to answer because I don't want to incriminate myself.
Anybody else? Let's take some volunteers here.
Well, if you're like me and you're trying to lose weight, you lose weight one day and then you get on the scale the next week and you've gained it all back +2.
That's right. That's a big factor, right? And so that's pretty discouraging. It's like, well, why? Why does this happen if I'm supposed to be losing weight? And I say reevaluate what the term losing weight really means. I think it's good to reconsider what this is actually doing or meaning. When I say losing weight, I'm actually not talking about the scale. I'm actually talking about inches. Go ahead, Rhonda.
I was just going to say, silly me got back from 2-day waterfall hike where I ate foods I didn't normally eat
Mhm.
and was full of inflammation and swelling and soreness. And I get on the scale and I didn't even let it register. I got off. I'm like, you dummy, you knew better than that. And I did last night, which was the day I was supposed to weigh. And it's given my body a chance to rest and recover. And I was actually down 2 ounces, which was about to disgust me until I took my measurements, and I realized that I was down, I think it was 5 1/4. Let me check real quick. 5.75 inches in just 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But yeah, and only 4 pounds for the entire month, but 5.75 inches in 2 weeks. So I quit pouting and I got happy.
That's really good, Rhonda.
No, that's good. Thank you for sharing that.
Bryan, do
Yeah,
we
go
want
ahead.
to discuss about muscle versus fat, especially for those of you that are doing any type of a training program? You're looking at the scale and that can lie to you. That's another reason why you don't want to be continued to depend on the scale.
Yes, a lot of things in the scale, especially on that. Consider what muscle is versus fat. Muscle is going to be a certain tissue and fiber that has fluid stored within it. It has mass. It retains mass. It's got, a certain depth and dimension to it, so it's bigger. But it doesn't mean to be bigger makes you look like a bodybuilder or a sculptor, sculpted or anything like that. I know people that look like very average people that have a lot of muscle mass, because everybody carries it different. And so it's important to see that or know that, which is again a factor on how that scale is kind of messy. It's a factor on why that scale will lie to you about your progress. And something I want to ask, and here's another quiz for you guys. How much? Well, go ahead. Oh, how much does 1 gallon of water weigh? Now we talk about drinking water throughout the day and drinking it daily, that being a part of our necessity. I believe it is. Who can tell me close, maybe without Googling again, how much does 1 gallon of water weigh? No Googling, no cheat. Take a guess. We pick it up all the
3
time.
pounds, 3 pounds,
Say 3 pounds, go a little higher.
5.
A little bit higher.
What? 6?
8.3 pounds. 8.3 pounds.
Oh,
How many of you think you drink a gallon of water a day? Think about that for a second.
I drink between 64 ounces and about 84 ounces typically, somewhere in there.
How many ounces are in a gallon of water?
Oh, I can't remember.
100 and something.
128. You are halfway through 1 gallon. So if you drink 64 ounces in a day, how much weight did you gain on that scale?
About 4 pounds.
4.15. That's right. Absolutely. So which means you're not doing anything wrong. But if the scale fluctuates a pound here and a pound there, or maybe you went on a specific trip, like a waterfall trip, and you drank a lot more than you normally do, you're going to weigh more after. Not to mention the exercise you did that was maybe out of the ordinary. Your inflammation in this case, through your joints, your tendons, your muscles, everything is going to retain more water or more salt, or just in general other things. So you've added something there that doesn't mean that you haven't lost inches, but it does mean that the scale is going to reflect the water retention we are all capable of having. Women more so than men in this case. Does that make sense about the water weight?
Yes.
Right. So don't get discouraged about the water weight, because you do need to keep hydrated. You do need to keep your body full of H2O for a lot of different reasons, to include salt and other things that either can come from our diet or just what we're actually drinking. So all in all, it goes back to the situation of the scale. The scale is one of our biggest methods of discouragement. And I know How many of you have quit a diet because the scale just wasn't giving you results? I mean, be honest.
I have. Absolutely.
I've won.
Yes.
And honestly, I'd say it's majority of people. It's discouraging because really the education is people are taught just kind of like a common, hey, here it is. We find out by the scale. The scale's a liar. The scale doesn't tell you a true indication that you're losing anything. It just tells you here's a couple of factors, but you need to look at the other aspect of it. So something I really teach and encourage is to absolutely keep track of your inches. And there's methods you can go online about taking your time and recording your measurements. Some people keep it real simple, just their waistline. Other people get more in depth and record everything from their forearm to their calves and everything in between. I encourage that because if you get into a situation where you plateau and the scale hasn't gone up or down, go ahead, Rhonda.
I was just going to say, don't forget you have 2 arms and 2 legs.
Yes, absolutely.
I haven't been recording both. I've just been
Believe it or not.
recording the one like a ninny.
You got to do both because especially if you're a right hand dominant or a left hand dominant, that muscle mass is going to make a little bit of a difference, and it does matter. So keep both sides, all extremities on a logbook whenever you're doing these things. And so whenever you get to the point where you're discouraged because the scale's kind of floating, right? You're 2 weeks in and the scale hasn't gone up or down. Or you make the poor decision of weighing yourself every single day. I do not recommend that. In fact, I say don't do it. Do not daily check your scale because, again, what you drank yesterday affects your hydration today, and that's not indicative of your weight loss. It's not. So I ask the question, do you want to weigh less or do you want to be smaller? For anybody. And most people, when they really think about it, want to be smaller or to varying degrees, I get people want to be in this certain realm of where they want to weigh, or people say, oh, I want to lose 20 pounds. What does that really mean to you? It doesn't mean on the scale. People say they want to lose 20 pounds because they feel that it's going to make differences in their inches somewhere. I mean, I think everybody agrees with that. So our terminology does matter. And we do a lot of these kind of isms that don't always mean what we say. So we have to be real careful about that. But the problem is we have those kind of phrases, but we don't take into account what they are versus what we're seeing, and we start to look at the literal, hey, here's my scale. So again, I go back into, if you want to get out of the discouragement mode, one of the biggest things you can do is keep a good record of a body tape, body measurement, and that means getting a cloth style tape and doing it right. There's things, again, looking up online or asking other people just how to do it, where to do it, because there are specific spots you want to do it on. And keeping an honest track record weekly of your progress from your left arm, your right arm, your left bicep, your right bicep, all the way across your body. And I can tell you when the scale fails you, you're probably losing inches somewhere on a steady track record. You're probably losing somewhere in your calf or in your glutes or in your abdomen or somewhere. Because if you're doing it right, and by right, I mean exercising more than you're taking in on a caloric intake, right? If you're doing that, the body has no choice but to submit to eating fat cells and burning the calories, as we put it, in order to gain that energy that it needs. And that's really what's going on. When you are exercising, your body is using energy that is stored from some part of your body. Unfortunately, it's not always the belly. Sometimes it's somewhere in the leg or around the face, believe it or not. And so if you really want to get to the point of truly track records and staying out of the discouragement mode, because it is a mode, it's frequent when you look at that scale, your best bet is to continue to tape yourself. Does this make sense? Anybody have any questions about this? All right. So that going into it, I mentioned exercise, I mentioned education. What does all this stuff mean? And then we go into exercise and types of exercises. Let's see here. Let me read some of the comments before I keep going here. Yeah, let's talk about that, Robert. I appreciate that. By all means, you have the floor. I absolutely love hearing what you have to say about that.
So when we talk about the scale, I'm going to give you the other side of the spectrum here. For those of you that have seen pictures of me and all that. So when I was in the Marine Corps, I was obese. Is anybody surprised about that I was in the Marine Corps and I was obese?
Yeah, take a pause and think
Definitely.
about
Nobody's surprised about that? Okay. Maybe. You gonna say something, Rachel?
Yes, definitely surprised.
Okay. I mean, the Army allows that, but Marine Corps doesn't.
That's right.
So the reason why I was obese is because at my height, they said on the BMI that I was supposed to be 178 pounds. That was my max. I was supposed to be 178 pounds. I was 210 pounds. Okay. But I was a competitive bodybuilder.
That's right. They
So-
would have sent people like you to me to have a talk, and I would have sent them back saying, no, he's fine.
Yeah. Because when we had the one captain, he said, how much do you weigh? And I told him, he's like, well, how tall are you? And I told him, he's like, well, you're obese.
Yeah.
And so, it's the other side of the spectrum here. That's why you don't want to look at that scale.
That's right. That's right. So here's the psychology behind that, in that the military leans on a very old 1930s education on old science. And this old science goes back into the 1800s about body weight, body fat, mass, height. And they actually came up with, and I'll take as a story with that, they came up with a scale, and they used a small portion of the population to generalize this scale. Unfortunately, at the time when they were coming up with this, it was very limited and very general of who they were actually pulling from the scale. It didn't have an honest representation. It didn't have enough people to do this. Like, that's like going down the street. Well, I'm going to take, my block of houses and say, all right, I got 12 houses down my road, and based on everybody on my street, I'm going to make a national average. Can't do that. It's not enough. But they did. Unfortunately, they made a huge mistake in this area. And what they came up with is that if you are a certain height, you should be below a certain weight. And that generally doesn't apply to everybody. There's a roundabout, but I can tell you genetically, if you're Norse or Norwegian, if you are, even smaller on some of the other ends of the scale, that national scale that the military leans on, and that a lot of us are getting our weight and standards and expectations from, especially from mass media, it's outdated, it's incorrect, and it doesn't account for everybody, which is why it's such a discouragement, especially when it comes to online, where people are seeing these other people like, oh, I want to be like them. Well, you might not genetically be in a position to be shaped like them. You might be shaped differently. And that's a pretty big factor. So for all of the account, all of that factor, you can have somebody who's 5'10", and they're being told that if they are above 175 pounds, they're overweight, they're obese. That's a surprisingly small body. And that's under 22% to be around that spot. And that doesn't mean you are obese. And the word obese itself is a part of the education that everybody needs to learn about. Again, add that to your scale. Don't let that discourage you or get you frustrated. So yeah, thank you for Robert. Thank you for pointing that out. As far as that goes, you can be on the muscle mass scale of weighing more on the scale by having a lot of body mass when it comes to weight and general size. So it's important to really get a look at what you actually are, where you are, and where you want to be with that stuff. And just don't trust that scale as your ultimate indicator. If anything, see it as a minimum trending thing, because there's a lot of factors that affect the scale. Does this make sense to everyone?
Yes, it makes sense.
Awesome, awesome. And consider, everything I'm telling you, by all means, do some research, take your time, look into, some of these methods, and try your best to get out of the mindset, the mentality that I got to weigh myself every day, because that right there is going to hurt more than it's going to help. Because what you really want to do, and something I teach, that if you want to see your weight, you need to look at the average of a 2-week span, and you can take it weekly, but I really encourage waiting every 2 weeks. But if you want to go a week, that's fine. But I warn you in that every week you could be in this weird curve of retention. And especially with ladies, where you go through a menstrual cycle, and what does that do? That actually retains a lot of water in your body, and you're going to inherently gain weight during that time that you're experiencing that. So where you could have plenty of results, and you could be going through this awesome, breakthrough, getting past the plateau, and then all of a sudden you gain 5 pounds. Well, know yourself, know your condition, and not just in that, there are some people medically that retain water because of pills, things like that. So consider as many factors as you can about where your water is being retained, or other factors that are going on with your life, because it's not just as simple as, oh, the scale says this, I'm obese. You're not obese, the scale isn't right, and it's only going to discourage you. If you want real results, you need to measure yourself. It really does boil down to that. And if you're looking for body fat, that's another thing. The only real way to get body fat, and there's a couple of methods, and some of you might have scales or have certain tools that have an electrode that you stand on the scale, and it says, oh, you're 26% body fat. Who's got one of those in their home right now? Come on, let's hear it.
I
No
do, but
one.
mine does not work.
See, it doesn't work, or it's wrong.
It doesn't work. It won't pop up.
Okay, well, I can tell you that the majority of them are wrong to begin with.
Oh, okay.
Have one.
Got one? How do you feel about it? You feel like it's accurate?
I don't know. I'd really like to. Okay, I remember in high school they had one of these cool little metal thingies where they measure something on the back of your arm,
Yeah.
and thought they could determine BMI. I want some other measurement besides dumping me in a pool underneath water.
So those are fat calipers, and BMI calipers is what they are, body mass index. And they do a little bit more of a modern approach to what your body fat is. And so those are a little more reliable. But the electrodes that people stand on in the morning, or just getting out of the shower, and you're like, oh man, let me see, I'm at my least weight. And then all of a sudden this thing tells you, oh, by the way, you are 5% more body fat than you were the day before. I mean,
Mine is steadily going down, but
Okay.
it's not always consistent as far as like
right.
amounts. Like I can hit a weight that I was 2 weeks ago, like it'll fluctuate.
Yeah.
And not, this is just an example, but in the body fat will be different on
Right.
the weight. So, I mean, I don't have anything to gauge it by to really know. So I don't really pay a big attention to that until I go to the doctor's office and he quits calling me obese.
Yeah. Well, keep in mind, most doctors are going to leave
Pain.
on dirty standard.
I said, they're not going to be happy with that. We're not going to talk about that till next year. And he says, oh, they're not going to be happy with your waist measurement either. I'm like, all right, meanness.
Fire. That's all right. They want to encourage you. A lot of these doctors really feel like, because they see 10,000 patients, that most of them don't care. A lot of people don't have any motivation, or they procrastinate their life away, and it's frustrating for a doctor from their perspective. It's frustrating.
He's very helpful. He really is, but he's just very, he tells the truth.
Sometimes that cold truth will get you.
Yeah.
Tact is not always a doctor's, part of their language. But even as a personal trainer, I'm sure Robert can attest to this, where you see people going through this, but then you see them quit, or you watch other people just not do anything towards themselves, and it's frustrating as a trainer as well, not just
That's
the
why I
doctor.
quit doing it.
Yeah. And so for those of us who care and who are trying to encourage and trying to help, but we can't force you to do it, unless you're with us and we can guide you through the steps or the workout. What you do at home matters. What you eat at home and abroad matters. And so when we know that you're eating nothing but excessive food or nothing but bad food, it's frustrating for us as a trainer because we know there's better results that can be achieved, but your diet doesn't reflect your goals. And that's why it's really important to be conscious of your diet and fight those cravings and fight those hormones that say, hey, I want to wake up at 1 a.m. and go to the fridge. When your body is supposed to be metabolizing things, you're not supposed to be eating that late. That's not good for you. I think people can see that and understand that, but how much willpower do we have against our own bodies saying, I'm hungry? Like the little child within us, please, I'm hungry. And a lot of us give in. And unfortunately, that's a challenge.
Bryan, I wanted to give a little background, if I could. I think it would help to encourage some and to help eliminate some excuses. So I got injured in the Marines, and I woke up one day in the hospital and they told me I would never walk again. So long story short, the Lord healed me. But as I was laying in bed, I asked him to bring me 2 books, a King James Bible and a book on nutrition, because I said, if I'm going to get, I can't walk again, then I don't want to be a burden to anyone. And I want to learn how to keep myself healthier and all that. So even though I was bodybuilding at the time, I didn't know enough about nutrition. So I knew I had to learn about nutrition. So that started my journey on that. From all the injuries that I sustained while I was in, like 2,000-pound armor plating coming down on my head. And if I didn't have a helmet, I'd be dead. I wouldn't be here right now. So the Lord's had his hand on me plenty of times. So I had fibromyalgia. And when I was heavier, not from bodybuilding, but when I was heavier, because I let myself go, I forgot about my eating and all that from the concussions that I had. So I picked up a lot of weight. My waist went up really big to where I've never had it before. And I said, I looked in the mirror one day and I said, who is this? And I was having so much pain. And I was just going to comfort food and eating whatever, cheesecake every day and all this stuff. And I said, I have to start caring again because I have to be better for those that I want to protect and those that I want to be here for. So I got back on this journey again, changed my lifestyle, and started doing all this because I got tired of having the arthritic pain. I got tired of being borderline diabetic and all those other things that come along with it, high blood pressure, hypertension, and all that stuff. So once I got my body weight down and got the inches down and got my circulation going, circulation is very important, then all that stuff changed. I got off of all that medication. So this is a lifestyle change for me. This is not a diet. I used to tell people that diet means die inside every time.
Yeah.
Trying this, it's making a conscious lifestyle change so that you don't have all this inflammation coming up and you have a quality of life. So hopefully that will encourage someone and, give you a kick in the rear to say, you know what, if he can do it, I can do it.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. And that goes a long way. And that right there is about encouragement with each other. We've all been through a lot of different things. Us being a pretty close-knit community, we love sharing with each other and we love giving our testimonies with each other, knowing that the little things in life can discourage us. It's nice to have the positivity and the relation to say, hey, I'm going through that too. How did you get through this? How did you break through? How did you get past this? And especially with dealing with overcoming the daily habits that we all struggle with, because everybody struggles with food hunger cravings and self-discipline issues where you're giving into it. And honestly, it's a struggle. I don't care who you are. It doesn't mean they're going to go away. It'll lessen, but you know, we all get hungers, no matter how great a shape we're in. From the peak bodybuilding to just somebody who's, you know, where they're happy with. You know, it does make a difference, but it's really about how you choose to respond to it, by either substitution. Like if you do have a craving, don't give in to, oh man, I want sugar. Well, maybe you switch to, you know, veggies, or maybe it is about water, and recognizing that it's not actually asking for food, especially late at night. And that's something else you'll learn as you study your metabolism and how your body changes from night to day, and how your body processes food and energy overnight, for you to experience that shift where it's like, man, I got 1 a.m. midnight cravings. What am I going to do about it? Recognize that through education. And the more you know about this stuff, the more you can better handle it. Does that make sense? All right. We're coming up on an hour here. I appreciate your guys' time with that. I want to open the floor to any kind of questions or any kind of comments or directions you guys want to go with this. I don't know where this could go, so if we want to pause the recording from here, thank you for giving me your time and letting me have the floor and share with you guys just kind of my points to it. I'll point out one other thing. I had the experience with some personal people in my life outside of the military where I was able